Hi guys, this is Yes and No podcast. This is our first podcast. My name is Arda, and this is Matt. How are you doing, my friend?
Hey, how are you doing? Yeah, this is actually the beginning of our hopefully series that we're gonna have. This is our first episode for our first podcast. Basically, the intention that we have, and especially for that one, the topic will be about podcasts in general. I know that's not sounding like pretty original because everybody's
This
doing
is
that.
gonna be fun, though. It's
Is
gonna
it
be
gonna
fun
be fun?
to.
I don't
I
know.
think I would love to see your take on other podcasts. I think I'm gonna really enjoy.
Well, that's the thing. I think like everybody, when they're starting a podcast, they have a tendency to say, "Oh, why are you doing a podcast?" and all that. And I wish that we could start already with a topic or subject that would like basically be more granted to what we want to do. But I think it's also for us a way to describe what we like about podcasting, why we doing it, why we don't like some of the podcast, and why we respect some others, and why we want to do something different. And I think this first episode basically is going to be about that. It's really going to be about our intentions for the rest of the series, and for the other subject and other topics that we want to bring and we want to talk about. And yeah, that's pretty much what it is.
All right, so let's get to it then.
Let's get
Do you
to
want to
it.
start with our podcast a little bit, or do you want to start with others? I think
No,
it would be
no.
good to set the what we kind of want to accomplish.
Yeah, that's definitely like the point. So, what we want to accomplish, and I think the idea of this podcast actually came from our conversation that we have most of the time. So basically, we're really good friends and best friends, and we're living on this other side of the world, and we have these tendencies to call each other and stay on the phone for like 2 hours straight, and we're not gossiping. It's not
Real
about
bromance, guys.
romance for sure. And we're not gossiping. We're not like, talking about like, oh, what that person is doing and what about you, blah, blah, blah. But we actually bring it up with a
Sometimes, a little.
sometimes, but yeah,
Sometimes,
really.
a little bit.
But it might be the start of the conversation. Like, really, it's not about like,
But mostly, it's like philosophical, intellectual, about thoughts and concepts and what we think about things. And it goes like an hour or 2 hours sometimes. Yeah.
yeah, and that's the point. It's like we're doing our therapy basically on the phone. So it starts with like, oh, something is bothering me, and there's this, that happened today, and I saw this, and then from there it just goes from this beginning, of this small topic, and then it goes to this huge conversation, philosophical conversation, and intellectualizing, most of the things that we're talking about in terms of how do we see that, and why do we see that, and why do we think that, and why, it's interesting to go further than just, oh, I thought about this and that's it. So I think that the whole conversation that we want to have is this idea of that we can have like an authentic conversation, not about being authentic ourselves, but through the conversation, like step out sometimes of our comfort zone, and then try to go a little bit further than just like, oh, I thought about this and that's it. And most of the time, and I think you can agree, Arda, is it goes to more cultural, and societal problems, and it goes to, I don't know, things that I think everybody's, in general, are facing on a daily basis, and why, and their conceptions of their life in general.
And this is also something that we were talking about. Even back then, you were pointing out the importance of authenticity in podcasts and that a lot of them are lacking of it. And I don't know, it was an interesting conversation that might even lead to why we want to do this and how we can make it more authentic. Uh, so
I
yeah,
mean,
I think it's yeah. Go ahead.
the thing is when I mentioned that once, it was actually about there's a lot of people trying to be authentic, in general in their life. And what you can see into the podcast nowadays, it's really people trying to perform in general, or trying to bring up some content just to get, the fame or some stuff like that. And it's just debate, 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 and then it actually doesn't go further than that. So, in terms of authenticity, I'm pretty sure we can see other podcasters, bringing up some form of authenticity, who they are, what they want to do, and in their self identity, they're pretty, I don't know, comfortable with who they are. But actually, in terms of the messages or why do they pick a topic or why they have a conversation with someone else, it's just pretty shallow most of the time. Or either it's comic, like comedian, type of things, or either they're trying to be like, yeah, this is super
Like
interesting,
which
and then
one,
they
for
just
example?
stops. What do you mean, which one? All right, so we're not like we're definitely going to talk about some different podcasts, but like we're not like picking it up, and we're not like being like, oh, those are the worst thing ever. But I mean, you understand what I'm saying. I think like
there are some that I would say you will go like, okay, I want to go in deep in this one. Like one of them, I'm curious what we're going to talk about is what was the? Let me check 1 second. Oh, whatever podcast.
Okay, yeah, all right.
Like so that one to me, it just reminds me. It reminds me a show back in Turkey. So I'm originally from Turkey, guys. I born and raised there, and we have this show exactly like that. But the guy, and there are like other girls, right? And the guy, he was a religious leader. Actually, it was almost like a cult in some sense. And then he was surrounded with these girls, full makeup, aesthetics, and it was like mind blowing to me. Like, who fucking watched this? It's just like crazy. And I don't know, like there are so many things about that show, whatever podcast, just reminds me that it's like just girls and some dudes kind of talking about certain cultural, social things. And I understand like they're like trying to be maybe philosophical and intellectually deep, but it at the same time feels so shallow, like how they're communicating.
I mean, I don't know if it's the same, kind of. I mean, I didn't watch the podcast you were referring, obviously, from Turkey, but yeah, the problem with the hashtag whatever podcast, it's basically, we're taking stereotypes, we're bringing it up, people that are interesting or have like opinion or opinionated in some point, and then it's just a clash. It feels like it's like reality TV at that point. You're trying to talk about the subject and a topic that is really deep, interesting, complex, and all that, and then you just have like people just throwing words at each other, and on every stereotype you can have, like the girls are going to be like that and with full makeup with all the boobs out, and the guy is going to be like, yeah, super clean and super shaved, and he's going to be like super alpha, some shit like that. And I don't know, like for me, you have like something, a platform that you can have people having real conversation, go deep into the subject, like bringing up real problems, small details to why things are more complicated than they are. But no, it's just like two people that are like that, and one is this side and the other one is this side, and then they're just confronting each other, and then nothing's comes out really from it. It's really like you have, I think when we're watching it, you're like, you're picking one side and that's it, it's done. You're now like, you look at the other side and you're like, oh, they're dumb, and that's it. Nothing, you don't go further than that. I don't think you can watch any of those podcasts and you're like, oh, I learned something today. This is really great. Like, this is not, going with my thoughts in general. I'm like, it's not my opinion, but I think they're making good points on the other side. And that's the whole problem that I have.
So I actually do feel more comfortable with, for example, Lex Fridman's, like that interview kind of a podcast setup. And only in those I feel like I'm learning something. But then there are examples like Joe Rogan, and there are like other examples of I don't know. I mentioned that kind of like Chris Williamson too, but it's not like there are some things about that like I can't get in. But the only ones that I learn is in the format that there's an expert comes in and talks about something. So to a degree, I like it, but then of course these other aspects of that type of a setting and that type of a conversation, there are like some negative implications about that. Actually, you might point out a little bit better because I know how you critique some of those sometimes. So The stage is yours.
I know. So no, basically, I mean, first of all, we need to talk about how we met in some sense. All right. So we actually met uh, during studying film, production back in the days in the US. And I mean, one of the things that you learn during production, it's not just like, hey, you finance how you finance the movie or something like that. There's this regard too also about how can you criticize getting feedbacks on the development of the movie. Meaning like, okay, you got a script, you got every details on it, what is good, what is not good, what might work, what might not work. So like it really, in a sense, I think it definitely bring up some more criticism about films in general. And there's different structures, there's so many things to follow in some sense that you pinpoint stuff. And when you look at media afterward, podcast videos and stuff like that, you can actually kind of have this sense of, okay, this is working, this is not working. But I don't know. For me, all those podcasts in general, they're trying to fit everything in it. Meaning like interesting topics, also content, and also engagement, and also you want to have people to listen to you. So you want to have something really, broad, on the broad spectrum, so everybody can relate to it. But at the same time, you want to see that you're professional, so you're going to have like a journalistic aspect of it. But I think at the end of the day, it's not working. Obviously, it's working. I think that's why we're making a podcast. But it lacks something that is true to two people facing each other and having a conversation. It's just like, oh, okay, either I'm having questions and I don't give a shit, like Joe Rogan does sometimes, and then you have like this expert in front of you and you're like, oh yeah, so I don't know, space is like that. And then he's like, oh yeah, cool, okay. And on the other side, you have Lex Friedman, which is going to have like more a journalistic aspect of it. It's going to be like, oh, so I'm interested about that and I want to talk about this. Okay, it's great. But then it just, it feels like there's a hierarchy in some sense. Like you're the guest, I'm the host, I'm bringing up questions, and I'm listening or not, because at the end of the day, we're just creating content. And it's lacking this conversation when we have, oh, we're talking, at a cafe, we're just drinking some coffee, and then we're like, okay, what's going on in the world, something like that. And I don't know, it's missing all of that in all those podcasts. For me, it's missing that point, which is, okay, we're having a real true conversation now.
And also there is another aspect to it, that the platform that they are giving to some people sometimes, can be bothering with some people too. I think the most controversial aspect of those are coming from that too, because I try to differentiate certain ideas that, like, all right, I'm like, this doesn't make sense, and I just move to another one. But there are some interviews that they go into is so controversial, and the things that those people say, which, okay, they should be able to say it, great, but it is just sometimes creates so much
drama.
I don't know how to say it, drama in some sense. And we had this conversation too, like, should these people be given that platform or not giving that platform, or what is the balance there? I don't know. I don't know, to be honest, the answer for it.
I mean, like for me, all right. So let's talk about that a little bit. Obviously, I think hate in general is something that is bad.
Yeah.
And when you give the platform,
Do not hate.
do not hate. Do not smoke either. They're like, we can do everything right now, like a PSA. But really, like, I think when there's kind of this responsibility, like, I hate these things, and I think Arda might be more inclined to talk about Marvel in general. But Spider-Man says that shit all the time, which is with great responsibility,
a great power. Yeah, a great power brings versa, great responsibility. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So I think it's really, important that, sure, you can bring, stuff into the conversation and debate about some stuff, and some hate speech, sometimes people that have like extreme views. But I think that's the problem that I have with Joe Rogan and all the others also. Not all the others, but some of them. Is like,
And how is that in Europe? Like, I remember we talked about that too, because in Europe, I think culturally it's a little bit different. Like, it's a little bit more distinct what hate speech is, I think, right?
I mean,
In US, it's different, I feel like.
wait, are we going to talk about free speech in general?
Not
No, no, no.
necessarily the free speech, but I think I don't know the laws, like in France, for example, about hate speech.
Yeah, I'm
I don't know
from
if you're
France, yes.
familiar.
So there's laws that prohibit to have like racist, talk in general. Like you cannot
Or like violence, like inviting to violence or some stuff
citing
like
to
that.
violence, stuff like that. Definitely. Does that mean France is a more open country than the US, for example, and not like as conservative? I don't think so. It doesn't change that much. That's something that actually people on the far right are gonna talk. They're gonna be like, hey, free speech. But then at the end of the day, it's only to be racist. But in Europe, in some part of Europe, you cannot say racist slurs or stuff like that, and people can be like, oh, free speech. But at the end of the day, that doesn't change the politics or the state of how people are perceiving each other and the conversation in general. So I don't think that really matters at the end of the day. But I think for me, really, it's who you put in front of those cameras or on those podcasts. Because when you have this huge power that Joe Rogan has, or Lex Friedman or Chris Williamson, definitely, they invite someone, and the goal is to create content that is going to be, create a buzz. And if they have someone that is controversial, that is going to be, it's going to be more, and then they can capitalize on it. And I think it sucks, to be honest. I think it's
Yeah.
really bad in general, because you don't go further into the conversation. You're not, contradicting them too most of the time, and nothing, comes out from it, except you just gave your platform to someone that is most of the time hateful, and I don't know, nothing, comes out from it. Like you're not like,
Yeah,
oh,
it's
something is interesting in what he's saying, or that. No, it's just like you're giving this platform to someone that is really good at talking, really good at, maybe super, I don't know, not proud, but in terms of super expressive in his identity, and that's it. You're not doing more than that, and you're not really connected with that person either. When Joe Rogan is having this conversation, or Chris Williamson, like they're just asking questions. They're like, oh, you're doing this or you're not doing that, it's bad. Oh, okay, whatever. And then they move on to another subject, and that's it. For me, that is why the podcast would be such an interesting medium, in terms of you can have, you can ask someone. It's not journalism, like, yeah, sure, there's journalism, there's like NPR that's doing podcasts and all that, but you can
the
have
news ones.
the news ones in general, yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. But they're doing it, and I think it's a great platform, for them to expand. But it's also a great platform when you can take your time, you can have the full conversation, go deeper into the subject. You can, Joe Rogan sometimes is trying to do that, like he's bringing up, some weed, and they're smoking and all
I
that.
I was watching Joe Rogan so much at some point, but then there was a point I was like, why the fuck he's supporting this guy? Like it's just like it feels like I was so confused time to time why he was switching. Like it almost like he's like doing it purposely. Like I'm gonna go this side, this side, this side
Yeah.
to be. I don't know. And then there was a point I just didn't really like it. So
I mean, I think there's
yeah.
plenty of great videos online on YouTube about Joe Rogan and podcasts in general, talking about that. Talking about like, oh, sometimes it feels like he's a leftist, sometimes he's more far right, and it's kind of in the middle, but not really. Like we don't know. I think there's really this episode is not going to be about that, and it's not about him, but I think the whole idea is either shallow and you have like people that are authentic in their self, but I think the conversation in generals are not. And you have a platform that is really great to do it. Like I remember, like I was watching H3 podcast for a while back in the days. What I'm saying back in the days, like maybe 5 years ago, right? I know they're still doing it, and I still think their platform is great in sense like they're taking their time. It's longer, episodes and all that. I mean, right now I think it's more, funny, and they're talk. I mean, I don't know. It's like a good time if you want. And at one point they were doing those kind of episodes too, where they were like having those conversations, and they give platform to those people that I don't like personally, Jordan Peterson, that type of things. And I didn't like. I mean, this is where I started. To
We
be
should
honest,
make just another episode for Jordan Peterson, just like a whole hour and a half.
No, but I think, but still, they had like this conversation that were a little bit more authentic. Today, I think it's just content, so they are like talking about. I don't know. Sometimes it feels like it's like a 7-hour podcast or something, like H3 podcast nowadays. But still, I think there's that platform. There's this way that you can communicate, and you can take that time, and it's lacking most of the time. I don't know. Do you have any podcast that for you can relate more, or you can dismiss, or I don't know? We're not trashing anyone.
Oh,
All right?
my Turkish brother Hassan is the. No, I really like Hassan, for example, and I really like Fear and too. I don't know if you would put it in the authentic, because we had this conversation yesterday about what authenticity is, and for me, I kind of approached it a little bit more like being yourself and try to be out of scripted things and performance pieces. So even some comedic podcasts that I can see them being authentic because it's improvised most of the times, but it's still scripted to a degree. But then when we talked about it, you also mentioned that not only being yourself, but having a stance in some sense, some intellectualized, opinionated aspect to it, talking about serious stuff and not just like goofing around in some sense. And that to you was authenticity. So I don't know if you see Hassan or Fear and in that sense, more authentic, maybe. I don't know.
All right.
I like it. I watched them.
I like them. Don't get me wrong. I like them. I like them really well. Like, don't. I mean, for the people listening to us, like, we're not trashing any of those. Like, I think some of them are really great for what they are. We're not saying that we're gonna have like a better platform for any of those things, but like, there's something almost performative most of the time. Not saying all the time, but most of the time, I think it's there. And even though
it's also, I think when you said that, the podcast we're trying to do, the reason we call it Yes and No is because we want to look at certain situations and don't try to be, oh, yes, this is how it is, or no, that's not. So we just want to point out this different aspects of it. This is actually a term that Matt uses a lot. You go like, did you like that food? And then he goes, yes and no. And then he goes why he thinks he liked it. But then there were things that he didn't like it. So he's sometimes like, yes and no. I don't know. So I think that would be most of the times our approach. Even we're talking about Joe Rogan or like whatever podcast or Fear and Hassan. I think that's how we would approach generally.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's the thing that is confusing me most of the time nowadays. It's you have like just people like either you like SN or you don't like him, or either you like Joe Rogan or you don't like him. And if I'm taking those two, I mean, characters, if I would say, persona in the podcast word, is because they are kind of, on the opposites, on the opposite side. And you're someone that is going to be more, regarding SN, and or either you're going to be more, for Joe Rogan. And I think when we bring it up, I mean, general opinions, I think you don't have to be either one side or the other. You can have like strong feelings for one side, sure. But I think the best thing you can have, I think we all, intelligent being, and I think we can agree that some stuff are good, some other are different, but interesting, and maybe this I like and this I like on the other side. I'm not promoting the status quo in general, or it's right in the middle. Absolutely not. I'm just saying that if we have to talk about truth in general, I don't think one person has the truth, and I think there's a part of truth in every aspect of every people and every conversation that we have. And I think being true to yourself is accepting and acknowledging that, okay, that person, I don't like him for this reason, I don't like his opinion about that, I don't like this, but there's that things that I don't know, I think it's interesting. And then if you go on the other side, you're like, okay, I like this guy maybe better, but there's stuff, that I don't really accept, or I don't really want to engage with it, but this part is interesting. And I think, truth is not about, oh, there's one truth in the world. It's really accepting the fact that there's multiple things, multiple opinions right in the middle. So what I'm saying,
there's
like,
a truth value to things, and that sometimes I think we go dichotomies in the sense of a true or false, but instead something has a true value and might be, and that's what I think, what I'm getting what you're saying. The more you get into something, investigate it, and try to understand yes and no's of it, the more you're getting closer to the truth in some sense.
Yeah. I mean, I personally, truth. I think we can go to.
Let's not go there. Let's not. Yeah, let's make another.
but no. In some sense, I think there's you're getting at least close to an authentic opinion when you're trying to communicate or having a conversation about those different subjects. Like, if I like this idea and also this idea and this, but they're contrary, like from what like all those podcasters or all the people talking about, or the medias or the TV or whatever it is, and they're gonna be like, it's either that or it's either that. But you can find, a little bit of right in this sense over there, and then a little bit of on the other side. Then you can, think about it yourself a little bit more. And then I think from trying to get to that truth, I don't think is that truth, actually. I think that's where the authenticity reside, because like that means when you have a conversation, when you engage with others and you want to communicate something, then it's just not like, oh, I heard this and that's it, and you're just throwing it up. I think you're trying to intellectualize what you learn, what you agree, what you don't agree on, and then you can come up with, I don't know, something more interesting. And this is where, for me, I mean, as we said and we talked already, like this is where the true authenticity actually is coming from. I don't think it's your identity and what you reflect to others visually, or the fact that you're, I don't know, super confident or something like that. I think it's a question about, can you step back for a second and think about all those things at the same time and agree that, yes, I agree with that, and no, I don't agree with that at the same time. Like the yes and no. That's basically, I don't know. For me, that's how I conceive it.
Well said. Well said, my friend.
No. I mean, do you have like any other?
But okay, we derailed a little bit. So let's go back to Hasanabi and Fear End.
Oh, okay.
You were kind of talking about them, but we get to like, okay, we're not shitting on anyone, just to be clear. So going back to that, what are your thoughts about that one?
I mean, I love Hassan. I think one of the things that I also personally like, that I think I have a problem with, is you have like sometimes not intelligent people, but people that are really good at talking, really good at coming with things, and it feels like they're super confident and they're like bringing that up, and they're like, yeah, this is so cool and so interesting. And Hassan, I think, is part of it. I really love his speech. Don't get me wrong. I love him. Like, there's so many things that I agree on with him, but I watch some of his Twitch, streams sometimes, and you see that he just don't give a shit about the person, that he's having a conversation with, that he's streaming with, all right, is doing some stuff. Maybe he's ADHD 100%, like we are, doing so many things at the same time. But it feels like he's disconnecting sometimes. Like, he knows so much about the topic, or he knows so much about what he wants to bring, that when he has this conversation with someone else, like, I think the other day was listening. Yeah, he's not listening. Like, literally. Like, I think you can see it on TikTok or YouTube and things. Like, you can see some of his play, and you see the guy like talking, and he feels like the guy is talking to himself. And Hassan is like doing, okay, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Let me respond to the chat, and then he's coming back and in front of the mic, and he's like, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like this. It feels like there's no conversation. Like, sure, there's conversation because it brings someone, and talk with him. But I think it's just like, it's just not engaging, really in terms of trying to connect on a deeper level with the person is in front of him.
Did he start it as like a commentary? Like, was he? I don't remember what he was doing at the beginning. I feel like he was just by himself critiquing or comment. I don't remember.
I
Do
mean,
you?
I mean, I like I don't really know, but from what I remember is just doing Twitch. There are others that we're following too, and I think some of them are really great. It's just like basically opinion that they're coming on live.
Thesis.
They're trying to not thesis, but they're like, okay, let's bring that video, and then I'm talking, to the chat. So it's basically trying to engage with a chat on the stream. But it's and then sometimes he has a guest and stuff like that. And I think from there, like for sure, he can create so many things in his brain, and oh, okay, I can connect this idea and I can connect this topic, and I think it feels so easy from him, that this is where I think it started from this, and then yeah, it became more political commentators, and then got invited as a guest on TV, and then I don't know, I think is invited to
Yeah,
some
I think he's
podcasts
kind
too.
of doing a little bit of debates at this point too, like low key debating too.
Yeah, and I think this is why I think is Fear End podcast. I think it's something different.
Yeah.
It's like friends coming together and okay, let's talk about something. It's like friends having conversation in general.
Yeah. And
I
then
don't know.
we were talking about more debate formats like Alex O'Connor, for example. I really like Alex O'Connor, but I also remember you were mentioning certain things about that format too. Like when two people just debating, their positions are either yes, like just yes, or like just like no. So there's like a dichotomy there. And I remember it was kind of bothering you, or that you had some critique on that, I think.
Yes.
I feel like I'm interviewing you, to be honest.
Like, there you go. You see, this is where podcast is. Like it's going. Okay, I'm the guest actually today. The next week you're gonna be the guest. No. Look, I think within reason from Alex O'Connor, I think it's a great platform. I kind of like this idea of bringing philosophy into people that are opinionated and more mainstream for sure. But mainstream, not like TV mainstream, but more internet mainstream for sure. I like this idea. I think it is really good as what he's doing. Is definitely trying to bring some topic and interesting point of view to the debates, general debates. But it's something that I listened to a couple of his podcasts, and there's something which I like and I don't like too. Same, yes and
okay.
no.
Yeah, yes and no.
Yeah, I think he's a great debater, and I think he has great conversation. I think he's trying to go deeper into subjects and topics that sometimes it's about. I mean, he's inviting someone, so he has a guest, and then he's trying to go against basically their thoughts in general. I think there was one with Ben Shapiro, and sure, confronts him.
One.
Like I think regarding others podcasters, I think is trying to confront them, and that is something that is great. But it feels, for me personally, from what I saw and what I was listening to, it feels he's trying to grab them. So he's trying to confront them, but also
grab them where?
Yeah, I grabbed them.
Grab them. Yeah.
No. Yeah, obviously.
Let's say just grab them.
Yeah, okay. Grab them. No, but he's trying to grab their attention, or it feels like for him it's a fight that he has, but like an interesting fight, not like a war. Whereas you're throwing all the missiles and all the bombs, toward the adversary, but it's more like sword fight. Game. No, chess game, but more sword fight. So there's something classy to it, and he definitely has his opinion, and he opened it up, most of the podcast by asking questions and trying to confront the idea of the guest. But it feels like sometimes he's trying to be sneaky, with his swords and be like, okay, and what about this? What about that? And and then he pushes them, and he pushes it, and it feels like he's trying sometimes too much, and it feels like they are disarmed for sure, and it feels in his face, I don't know, when you look at the videos, it feels like he's like, oh, this is so cool. I touched him for real.
Like enjoying it.
He's enjoying it, sometimes, but it's like in a classy manner. This is why like sword fight,
Okay.
like flurry, like I don't know.
Okay.
So this is I mean, I like his process, but this is also something that is transpired a little bit for me. It feels like his goal is just to disarm the person in front of him, not confront that person against their own opinions and trying to come up with an acknowledgement from both sides saying like, okay, you see, you're right there and maybe you're wrong there. It's just like, hey, you see, I just pushed you against your own opinion, and that's it. And then you just back it up, and it feels like a little bit of pride, in himself, like, oh, I touched that person, which is, don't get me wrong, like I like to see Ben Shapiro, getting on his knees, but
I mean, that was an interesting, actually, conversation that they had. Like, it almost felt like a conversation than a debate. When I watched the whole thing, and when I was watching certain moments, I know Ben Shapiro can be more aggressive, more like attacking, or doing that poking more with other debates or conversations that he got into. But Alex has, like, if I compare Alex to Richard Dawkins or Hitchens, what was the? Anyways, I don't remember, but they're like more aggressive. They can be more
pushy, for sure.
Pushy, but Alex has a little bit more a subtle tone, even though I don't know if he's enjoying it. But his tone, his conversation and his epistemology, his knowledge, I think it's pretty grounded. I think he has his own opinions, but I think he is not always trying to go there, but trying to find where I can make this conversation more honest, truthful, but also I'm going to be grounded to the knowledge, the collective knowledge that I studied. And he uses those two tools. And that's why I think it sometimes comes a little bit more genuine than others. And then when I was watching Ben Shapiro, I was seeing Ben Shapiro was engaging too. He was listening in some sense what he was saying, and maybe both ways. So it was an interesting conversation. I really liked how he approached certain things that Ben was saying. But that's why I kind of like watching his stuff, like what he is talking about when he talks about and how he does that.
I mean, for sure. I think there's.
But if he enjoys it, I don't know. Maybe he does.
I don't know.
Maybe
like,
he doesn't enjoy it.
Don't get me wrong.
Num.
Yeah, I touched him. But I don't know. I feel like there's also a question of tones. I think is someone that is super smooth in the way he talks and the way he's communicating with the guests in general. So I think people are more relaxed and not into a performing point where, oh, there you go, I'm just sending one topic that's really well, and go ahead, just grab that and then bark on it. No, I think his approach is definitely, we're having this conversation, we don't really know where it's gonna start, what are the topics in between, and the way he's talking, it's pretty slow, and he's like, so what do you think, about this subject? And I think that kind of put people.
And then he grabs the opponent.
He grabs them, he's poking them and he's grabbing them. But I mean, for sure, I saw that with Destiny too, when he invited Destiny on his podcast.
Ooh, Destiny. Let's talk about Destiny.
No. No, we don't have to talk about him in general, but I think it was. I think all those people are actually performing really well. If you take Hassan, if you take Destiny, I don't know, there's a couple that Alex, I can mention too. Maybe. Like, they're definitely really good, like they can talk, their thoughts really fast.
Dude, Destiny speaks so fast. I think Ben Shapiro is like that too. Yeah. They're speaking so fast. I can't even, how do you debate? It must be so hard. It's just so fast. I
think Jordan Peterson really, works. Jordan Peterson capitalized on that, really. I think most of the people just listen to him and they're like, wait, I don't understand what he's talking about. So it's super interesting, It's great. I love it. And And I think that's the whole point of those people. I'm not saying they're not intelligent. I'm not saying like they don't have really good sense of what they're talking about. Um, but definitely the way they talk about it and how fast they're talking about it, definitely, makes things more interesting. It feels like it's a rush. It feels like, it's this action that you want to follow, and you want to follow the thoughts. You want to follow where it's going. And all of those, they definitely have the same way of doing it. Like San, um, Destiny, Ben Shapiro, Peterson, they all not in this, definitely not the same side, but the way they communicate is definitely that. And I think Alex O'Connor is actually trying to calm them, through the tone of his voice, and then they have to relax, and then they have to be more thoughtful about the questions, because like his podcast is about philosophy, and I think ours is definitely going to be about that too. But it's like concept of philosophy, so it's trying to go and scratch, the surface with those people, and then they go a little bit slower, and the conversation is definitely a little bit better. And I think for Destiny, which I like, when he's debating and he's going definitely super fast, and sometimes it feels like he's super like, passionate about what he's talking about. I think the podcast with Alex was super interesting. Like I discover stuff about Destiny that I personally don't agree with, I don't like. And those are philosophical subjects. And I think when you're seeing someone that is strongly opinionated about politics or what's going on in the world, and then you see that his philosophy of life is considering stuff differently, then it might change totally the perception that you have of that person. And I think Alex is trying to do that. But still, he's giving platform to people that I don't agree with, that they should not have this big platform. But yeah, for sure, the 2 hours of this podcast with Destiny was interesting in that sense. It really starts with...
Was it 2 hours?
I think it was 2 hours, yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah.
All right.
Basically the same time as ours, I guess. I don't know when we started.
We are kind of in the 50th minute, I would say. I think it was like 11:30.
Okay.
But we actually have a few more like things that I think we want to touch base to, but I don't know. Like,
no, go ahead. No, it's fine. Like, don't
the more comedy things. Like, for example, I do watch more comical podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
And it has nothing to do with the intellectual, opinionated aspect of what we talked about. It is just sometimes bullshit stuff, And I don't know. Like, there are two things that bothers me about those things. One is comedy can be...
Are you saying that you like those comedy, podcasts, but then it bothers you?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I like it, but no, there are some things that I don't like about them. That is because I don't know. Sometimes when I watched certain ones, like for example, The Basement Yard, you love them, right? No, you don't, or maybe you do. Maybe you do. I don't know, but you don't follow them. For example, like I sometimes like to watch them goofing around, but then sometimes there are things that they say. Then I'm like, fuck, dude. Like, why are you getting into that topic? It's just like, But they're like so... I don't know. That's why I think they're improvising to a point that I don't know. It kind of disturbs me a little bit that I'm watching it. I don't know. I become self-conscious about it. I go like, should I listen to Michael Jackson or not listen to Michael Jackson? Fuck Michael Jackson. I don't know. Like, it's just confusing sometimes. I don't know.
What do you mean, like, about what?
Like, no, you hear, like, for example, there's certain artists that either like did horrible things, or they did just bad things, or they're just talking about shit that is considered like not okay to talk. And then you kind of see their products, like the arts they do. Or performance that they did, right? And some I'm more distinct. I'm like, all right, fuck that. I don't need to consume this. But then there are like these other ones, that the one that I was talking, for example, Joe Rogan was at some point, and I a little bit faded out from like constantly watching it. And Basement Yard is a little bit like that too. Like, there's no opinion pieces in Basement Yard, But then there are like some shit that they're saying. I'm like, come on, like don't say that or don't go there. You know what
Okay,
I mean?
give me an example. No, I don't see, like. So
I don't remember.
I don't know. Like, but wait, do you mean like political or philosophical or
I would say more
societal?
social and cultural. Like,
Okay.
I don't know. Sometimes it feels maybe they're teasing with gay people or they're teasing about women, something. And then I'm like, maybe you shouldn't say that. I don't know. You know, it just makes me I don't have a specific
No, I know, I
example.
understand. All right, so okay, well, but is it like okay? But I think this is a whole podcast about comedy, maybe or something to talk about.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm just like you mean like there's like sometimes they were like the jokes they're making. It's kind of
It's like I don't give a shit. It's like sometimes I'm like, okay, this is a joke, obviously. I watch Ricky Gervais, for example, and
mhm,
the one thing that he does is like he sometimes talks about uncomfortable topics,
mhm.
turns it into a joke. But when you listen his more day-to-day interviews, like you know that he's joking around it. There are other comedians like that does it, and I don't want to say get away with it, but their mastery is basically how am I gonna make this comical, but I also have a stand on this, like intellectual, opinionated stand on this. But with some comics, it feels like they don't have any stance. They don't have any actually intellectual, let's say, backbone about it. But then they joke about it, and then they get a reaction about it, and then they're like, "Me, it's comedy," you know. And I don't know. I don't think it's okay in some sense. It bothers me a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think it
I'm
just
not
goes.
saying the basement yard is like that. I'm
No,
generalizing right
I
now.
know. But I think that's that's the same idea that we talked about earlier. It's a question about great power, great responsibility. I think there was like um really good piece on I don't know which channel I saw on YouTube a couple of years ago, and it was about PewDiePie. So PewDiePie,
Oh,
like at one point, like was like
I have never watched
I
PewDiePie,
know,
for
I know.
example. I know you.
I know, but I think he started like with the games for sure, and then he was trying to be more commentative and trying to give opinions sometimes, and he was still creating like goofy contents, and he had like this period of time where he was like referring himself as, joking about Nazis and stuff like that, and people didn't like it, and then he was like, "Wait, it was a joke. Like you could understand a joke," and he was canceled. This might be another
Hmm.
conversation about. And I think I saw a piece back then which was explaining why this is not a joke in some sense, and how when you bring up a joke or you're trying to be comical, in the conversation, there's like different structures to it. It goes back to the same as what we learn, in school, in films, is you need a setup. You need to, like, there's different steps to talk about something sensitive and then deliver the joke. And if you don't do those steps, then it makes people, I don't know, not really comfortable. And same thing, you don't know if at that point if it's a joke or if it's an opinion disguised as a joke. And I think that's
Yeah,
that's what I
and
have
that's
with
the
those.
part that's confusing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's what for me, those are podcasts are entertaining for sure, 100%. But this is why, like personally, I don't like the tones of it, and it's fine. Like different people like different type of things, but like that's the thing that bothers me with podcasts in general is because sometimes this guy's as a joke in the entertainment of the podcast. Well, there's something that you don't know if it's an opinion, you don't know if it's a joke, you don't know if they're true to what they're saying. And that's the part that, again, I'm going back to the beginning of the conversation, that lacks authenticity. Because like if the person, that person and you know how that person, talks in general, and if the conversation is true, in general, then that okay, that person is when he's talking like that and what he's referring at that point, it's a joke or it's not a joke. The problem with like performing podcasts and entertaining podcasts is they can be really, I don't know, they can switch from one side to another. It can start with, okay, this is a joke and we're doing like entertaining content, to I just gave an opinion right in your face. And then you're like wait, what are we talking about? And it's not the same content, it's not the same podcast at that point. And I think that's what might be confusing. And the whole idea, to go back to authenticity, I think if people engage with you and people watching or listening to you, they kind of know who you are, like just with the thoughts, not as, the persona that you represent and your identity, like you can see from the outside, or your performances. Like if you're really true to yourself and you can bring up that authenticity, you know that people are going to react differently to your opinions or a joke, because like they will know, okay, this is satire at that point. Like we know that person and he's joking, we know he's bullshitting. Maybe he's not a good, comedian, but like I know, it's doing that at that point. Or no, I know it's his opinion because this is something, that is repeating itself sometimes.
What was the name of that guy? He has a mullet, I think. I don't know.
The Joe Rogan for the Wish.
No.
Joe Rogan
I
from
don't
Wish.
remember his name. God damn it.
From Wish.
I don't know.
So wait. Okay, talk about it anyway.
No, I mean he's a little bit like that too. He sometimes goof around and say shit, and then immediately gets self-conscious about it. I think that's the funny thing sometimes about him. And he's like, wait, maybe I shouldn't say that, in some sense. Like he's thinking out loud, or sometimes try to get out of it. But that's something that he does too, and he's, as you said, he's sometimes bringing people that's a little bit more controversial on his platform too.
Okay, so you remember the guy is called Theo Van, all right? But what is the name of the
Googled
podcast? Yeah, I found it.
So I just Googled comedian with mullet.
Oh my God.
That was the first one popped out. I mean, I don't know what to say. He's the only one. So
shaming here. All right. I know. Hey, it's fine.
But yeah, Theo is like that too. Theo sometimes like says something and he immediately gets self-conscious about it, and he's like, maybe I shouldn't say that or something. But yeah, I mean, he has interesting interviews too. That's like, I'm like, ugh, all right, this guy, you're gonna talk with this guy, and I don't know how it's gonna go.
I mean, it is a character too. Like it feels like it's Wayne's Word. Remember Wayne's Word, the movie?
No.
Wayne's Word. Come on, man. But I think it's kind of the same. It's kind of the same. You'll look it up. I mean, if you don't know Wayne's Word, I don't know if we can still be friends.
What is it called?
Wayne's Word. Come on. No, come on.
Oh, yeah. I didn't watch it.
Didn't watch it. Are you?
I mean, it's not on any. It's not on any streaming.
I mean, I don't know. This is such a cool movie, dude. Like, I don't know. I'm not respecting you that much right now. I mean, anyway, so
I'll check it out.
I mean, for me, just like Theo is kind of the same character in some sense. And then there's like one point, they're almost doing a podcast. They're doing like live TV from their basement, which is my case right now. It's kind of, I mean, it's about rock and roll, and it's one of the most cult movies you can ever watch. I don't know. It's weird that you didn't watch it. But I don't know. Theo remind me of that for sure, 100%. We're only almost talking about men doing podcasts, which I think it is something to talk about. I think the way people are processing podcasts in general, it's either they're listening to a specific podcast about a specific topic, a specific subject. But I think in that realm of general conversations or political conversation or philosophical conversation, it's only men most of the time. I think it just goes to say, the society in general, how it's just weird that it's only men talking about. Like, I do remember seeing women doing podcasts, like in general. Like, I know about specific topics or conversation about, women in between women, like some men can do, with alpha podcasts and stuff like that, men between men. But it's difficult to find a podcast with a woman host that is gonna have a conversation about philosophy or societal, problems, or philosophical or cultural problems. And I think there was Ziwe. I don't know if that's her name, Ziwe, and she's doing interviews. I think it's also on TV. Uh, I think it goes a little bit to that. Definitely, she's a comedian too. And she interviewed George Santos. When he got kicked out of the
Oh, I
Congress.
watched that one.
Right? You remember that
That
one?
was funny.
But I think it's interesting. But at the end of the day, it
But it was
feels
more like an interview, though.
definitely. And I know she has this. This
Like
shows
most
that
of the women podcasters I watch are comedic. Like they're doing comedy.
yeah, but
And comics, like they're doing stand-up.
I bet there's some others talking the same
Yeah,
things
me
that
too.
we're doing.
Yeah.
And this is why I'm mentioning her, is because sure, she's asking questions, but Lex Friedman is doing the same, all right, and she's doing it in a more comedic aspect too. But it is something that is interesting, I think, to have a conversation about, is like why it's only men, and not only, but the most famous ones are men. And hopefully, we'll be able to not change that. Because
Or is it the algorithm that's feeding us just the men?
maybe, yeah, maybe it's the algorithm. AI is bringing the pod cultures, back to the patriarchy.
Yeah. Yeah. Another podcast topic.
Yeah. But yeah, as I said, as I mentioned, hopefully we're gonna have a conversation about relationships, about men and women, the toxicity, dating cultures. Maybe I just said it already, but hopefully we'll be able to bring guests to those conversations too, because I think we need different perspective. And as I said, and I think that's the whole idea of this first podcast, and why we want to do this podcast is to bring up authenticity to conversation, not having like opposite sides or just debates, that are not going further than just like our own opinion. So if we can have people with different opinions, and I know that we can have maybe other people on the podcast that can bring those opinions and different point of views, that will be something definitely more interesting and make things more complicated than they might be sometimes. What are your take on I don't know, following topics, or
I absolutely didn't listen anything you said.
wait, did you just do a Hassan with me right now? Come on. No, no, but what
I totally agree with you.
no, but what is your take on the future topics, like, or where you see the podcast going?
I can definitely see us getting a third person who is more of an expert of the topic that we want to talk about. I think that would be nice. I think I would be a little bit interested in talking with people too on the comment section in some sense. I don't know how that would go, or if it would. I don't know. I don't know if that's a good idea or not, but I don't know. Maybe we can try an episode like that to see how that goes.
Just to put things in perspective, regarding this podcast, you'll be able to find it on YouTube, obviously, and on your streaming platform, so Spotify and the others. And how we record it is also on Twitch at the same time. So we're doing a live stream on Twitch while we're recording that. So sometimes we gonna have those conversation, which are gonna be specific to one topic, and we want also to have another part of the podcast which is more gonna be different topics and more engaging with people. So on the chat or on Twitch, on live, and people can interact with us, and we can expand our conversations in general. Yeah. But right now, we're available on every platform. On YouTube, you can watch some replay maybe on
TikTok.
Twitch, TikTok, all of them, or on Instagram. You can find us at Yes and No Podcast, on Threads, Yes and No Podcast, on Twitch, Yes and No Podcast, on YouTube, Yes and No Podcast, and on TikTok, Yes and No podcast for the moment.
On TikTok it wasn't available.
No.
Damn it.
But you can definitely find our links on every platform. Yeah, if you want to help us go a little bit further with the podcast, we have a Buy Me a Coffee. So that can help us, expand our technical solutions to have a better quality to this podcast, and bring more authenticity to this conversation.
I like that note. Yeah. Bringing more authenticity to the conversation for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. I mean, it was a good first episode, I think. We can wrap it up a little bit.
You see, like, he's already like super sure about himself. He's like,
I'm gonna go.
All right. Yeah, this was our first episode. Thank you for listening. As I said, you can find us on every platform at Yes&No Podcast. I was one of your hosts, Matt, and my good old friend Arda with me. Hopefully, we'll find you on the next episode, and stay tuned on our socials to see what might be the conversation about. Thank you for listening. I'm Matt.
All right. Thank you, guys. And this is Arda. We'll see you next time.